What are you saying, people? Is another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. Just say, guys, I'm always going to say it. Thank you so much for supporting what me and Rob are doing. You're liking and subscribing and you're sharing, and we're now starting to go up on different platforms as well. We're on obviously Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Our Apple has also gone up as well, and also the Patreon. Don't forget to sign up to the Patreon, where that's going to be a lot of our CPD, and me and Rob are going to be doing other things as well. Yeah. So no, thank you so much. So people, just to say, obviously we had our first health colleagues who came, and we had a safeguarding advisor, Detrice, and we had Aisha as well. Sorry, Aisha safeguarding advisor, Detrice health visitor. We actually have our first NHS midwife.
Woo!
Yeah, who's come on to the podcast. Yeah, and I'm literally so happy. I'm gassed to have this individual here. So can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Sharron Owusu and I am a midwife.
Sharron, big up. No, Sharron, do you know what? Thank you so much, because
Thank you.
Like myself and Rob, to be honest, part of the podcast, because we work with education and health, and for a long time we haven't had health professionals on. It's only more recently where we had a health professional on.
Yeah.
So we've got you on as a NHS midwife. So talk to me about your journey. What made you want to become a midwife?
So my whole life, I always knew I wanted to become a midwife. But when I was a lot younger, I'm saying like probably around 4 or 5 years old, I was always obsessed with like all the younger children in my family. If someone was pregnant, I wanted to be around them. I was just always drawn to, I just was always very maternal and wanted to like nurture pregnant women. It's just something that was always in me. So growing up, I always knew I wanted to work in that field. Like I wanted to work with pregnant women and babies, but I didn't know what a midwife was. Obviously going through primary school and then going on to secondary school. It wasn't until probably sixth form that I really started to look at my options and how to become a midwife and the role of a midwife. I also looked into if I wanted to become like an obstetrician. So that I wasn't sure where it was going. And then I got pregnant with my daughter. So once I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to do a course that wasn't going to be too demanding. So I actually trained in education first.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first degree is in education. So I finished that degree, and then I was working in parenting assessment and also working in schools. When my daughter got a little bit older and we were a little bit more stable, that's when I decided to actually take the leap and start my midwifery degree.
Did you ever think about social work?
I did think about social work, but I felt like I wanted to be a bit more hands-on.
Yeah.
So before the centre I was working in became a parenting assessment centre, it was actually a mother and baby unit.
Okay.
So it was just kind of like a space where we housed women temporarily and supported them with the baby.
During the assessment period?
No, like maybe after the assessment period.
Okay.
So there's different centres that do different things.
Okay.
So maybe after the parenting assessment was complete and they were waiting for housing, they'd come to our unit. So I did that for a little while, and I just like being more hands-on. I felt like social workers, you guys do a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, that's everybody says the admin stuff. No, it's true. It's
too much paperwork. I wanted to be more hands-on, so that's why I went down the midwifery route.
So let's talk about, before we go into kind of your career, let's talk about motherhood for you. So, being a mum who was studying, how were you able to kind of balance it, being a mum and your daughter? What was it like during that period?
I would say like I've had different seasons because obviously I've done 2 degrees whilst being a mum. So there's been different seasons. So there's been times where it's been a little bit easier. There's been times where it's been a little bit harder. I would say the older my daughter has gotten, it got more challenging.
Yeah.
When she was younger, when I first went back to university, she was 9 months old. And so she didn't really know much. But the older she got, it got quite, I feel like parenting is demanding, but in different ways and in different stages. So when you have a baby, you know what baby requires. When you've got a young child, you know what a young child requires. So when she was a baby, I found it much easier to kind of like she would take naps and then I'd get my work done.
Yeah.
Whereas now that she's a lot older, she wants us to be going to the museum. She wants to go to the park. She wants me to push her on the swings. And I'm thinking, I've got to write my dissertation.
Yeah.
So I would say it was challenging, but I think I'm blessed, I would say.
But I would say, Sharron, you know, I think you're very much an inspiration because actually you're showing people that it can be done.
Yeah,
do you know
100%.
what I mean? But what was kind of like, was there any moments that you was like, oh, it's really, really difficult, I want to give up? Or was it like, you know what, I'm really, really just going to persevere. I'm going to do this for my daughter. I'm going to make sure that I achieve what I want to achieve.
Do you know what? Maybe during my studies, every other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You have those thoughts, you know, when children are unpredictable.
Yeah.
So I might plan that, okay, from Monday to Wednesday, I'm going to focus on this piece of work, or maybe I'm going to do some reading, and then my daughter will get chickenpox. What do? You know, I have to really, I can't prioritize my work. My child always comes first.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that would mean falling behind with my studies. And both times that I have studied, I haven't graduated with my cohort.
Okay.
Just because of different challenges and circumstances. And I think for me, that was a big thing. Like I always wanted to finish with my class.
Yeah.
But for some reason or the other, like when I was doing my midwifery, I had several bereavements in my family, which meant that I had to step out, take time out. So it got really frustrating because not only am I balancing, you know, being a single mother and trying to stay on top of my studies, I've now got this added layer of grief, you know. So it would always be challenging. There was always times where I wanted to give up, but like you said, I'm showing women that it can be done.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. I feel like you can find a way to like push through and get to where you want to be.
So once obviously you've gone through that transition, you've then qualified and you've become a midwife. How long have you been a midwife for?
So I've been working now for about 7 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm newly qualified, very, very new.
So do you know, I want to ask you, so because I'm a social worker, we have this thing called ASYE, Assess Social Worker Year in Employment, for your first year.
Yes.
What's the equivalent from when you're a midwife? Do you have an equivalent?
Yeah, so our equivalent is called a preceptorship. So right now I'm a preceptor midwife. So what that means is that I work independently, you know, I take care of the women on my own, but I still have, so when you're a student midwife, you have something called an MPAD or a MORA, or now an e-MORA. So what that is like a booklet that you go through and it has all your competencies. So when you go onto a shift, if you're a student midwife and you're watching this, let me give you some advice.
No, go on. Tell the people.
When you go into a shift, have a list, like a to-do list of look at your competencies and then set yourself goals, like what you want to achieve during that shift. Our shifts are long, 12 and a half hours. And you can easily go into that shift and not know what you've done for those 12 and a half hours. So I used to go into every shift with a to-do list, like, okay, today, when the baby's delivered, I want to give vitamin K. That's on my to-do list. So I know once I've done that, then this midwife that I'm working with, my supervisor, can sign me off. Or after I've done that for a couple of shifts, then I know, okay, I'm competent. I can get that signed off. So as a preceptor midwife, the book is not as, it's not as big, or there's not as much competencies, but there's still things that we have to get signed off. And the preceptorship program is about 12 months long.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, so I'm just over halfway through my preceptorship.
And what's your caseload? Is it called a caseload?
So it's not called a caseload. It depends on what area that you're working in.
Yeah.
So for example, the home birth team, they caseload. Maybe in community, you will have like a set group of women that you see on a regular basis, but that can change. So we don't really do case loading unless you work in a particular area. But where I am at the moment, I'm on labour ward, so I take on different cases I can take on, like, I could have 3 patients in one shift. It just depends on how quickly they deliver or what the circumstances are, and also the acuity in the ward as well.
And so with your work, Sharron, at the moment right now, because you said you're just over halfway.
Yeah.
What is your touch base with social workers? Because as a social worker, I've worked with loads of midwife over the years. So what's the kind of communication you have with social workers, or your relationship like with social workers?
So for the women that I see, before, as I'm working on labour ward at the moment, when I see a woman, they would have already been had their booking appointment. And usually at a booking appointment, that's the first contact a woman has with the midwife when she finds out that she's pregnant. So in that appointment, we try to get as much information as we can from the woman. If there's anything that comes up as like a red flag or anything that seems like it requires safeguarding or a social worker's input, we make that referral. And we also refer that woman to through a different pathway. So we have a specific team that deals with vulnerable women. So that team will liaise with the social workers throughout that woman's pregnancy, and also during her intrapartum care, so when she comes onto labour ward to have the baby, and then afterwards as well.
So in terms of Sharron safeguarding,
Yeah.
What's in terms of the women that you've worked with, what have kind of like been their experiences where there's safeguarding concerns pertaining to the children? Is it kind of domestic abuse? Is it mental health? What kind of women have you worked with? What at the very beginning, from your current experience right now at the moment?
From my current experience, so I have been a student for 3 years before qualifying, so I would say like it's been like almost 4 years now. I would say we see a range of different things. We see domestic violence, we see women that are homeless, women that have already had children removed from their care and are having another child. So there's a lot. It ranges.
And how important, Sharron, is your relationship with the women that you're working? Because as social workers, we're always taught that, you know, it's about the relationship you have with the family, but how important is your relationship with the women in terms of general work, them being able to be open with you? How key is that as a midwife?
I think as a midwife, that is one of the most important parts of our role, is relationship building, not only with the woman, but with a birthing partner as well. If someone doesn't trust you, they're not going to open up. If they come in and your energy's off, or you seem like you're uninterested in them, they're not going to want to tell you everything that's going on in their life. So I think it's really, really important as a midwife to create a safe space for women and their families to be open and share. So yeah, I think it's key. It's really, really key. And for me, I always try to put myself in that woman's shoes and remember that this is a really, really vulnerable time in a woman's life. So it's extremely important that I'm understanding, I take time, I listen. It can be difficult because the NHS is under immense pressure at the moment.
I was just about to ask you, that's what I was going to lead into,
Let's say you're seeing a woman in the community and you're doing this booking appointment. There's usually like an hour or an hour and a half time slot. You can't find out the woman's whole life in an hour appointment. In that same appointment, we do bloods, we check the woman's weight and height. There's so much to do. So I feel like we have a lot to do in a short amount of time. And also during this time, we need to try to build a relationship. It's a lot. Even talking about it, guys.
No, but you know what, Sharron? I was going to ask you that because one thing that's why I'm so glad I've literally got an NHS midwife here, because I want to ask you, like, the NHS is under so much pressure. What is it like, Sharron, when you're going in? It must, because, you know, like, I know during the pandemic, and, you know, we talk about during the pandemic, I remember that midwives were saying a lot that there's not enough staffing. It's a lot. It's in and out. You're in there. Is how pressurizing. What is it like? Because you do 12-hour shifts. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I mean, as a social worker, I know
12 and a half.
12 and a half.
Sometimes longer.
But what is it like, Sharron? Sharron, keep it real, innit? Is it that relentless? No, listen, come on, like that. Sharron, come on, no, Sharron, be honest. This is we need to hear from midwife. Is it that relentless? You're not going to get in trouble, Sharron.
I know that I'm not going to get in trouble, but do you know, it's not that I know I'm not going to get in trouble. And I know I can speak freely and openly, but I'm trying to also show you guys that it's an amazing profession. And it's
yeah.
so rewarding. When I'm at work and I'm with my patients and interacting with them, I don't even feel like I'm working. Like, I feel like when you are a midwife, or before you get into midwifery, you have to know that this is your calling before getting into it. So that's like first things first. But in terms of like the conditions that we're working in, it can be rough, especially I started in the height of COVID. So yeah, so I started in 2020. And
right at the brink when everything was starting.
When it all kicked off, we were wearing masks, we were in full PPE. We're telling women that they're about to have a baby, they're scared, they've not done this before, or even if you have done it before, it can still be a scary experience, especially if you've had previous trauma. We're telling these women they have to be on their own.
Yeah, to isolate because of what was going on with
the
isolation. Yeah,
and after the baby's born, then we're now telling them that they can only have one visitor, or sometimes there was no visitors allowed, just depending on what was happening. So it was tough during that period, and obviously now it has its challenges because of the shortages of staff. I would say more recently, to kind of curb that shortage of staff, the NHS brought in a lot of international midwives.
Yeah.
So that has been also a transition as well. So a lot of these international midwives that have come in, they have a wealth of experience. However, they are now adapting to a new system.
Yeah, and coming into the country as well.
Coming into the country, living in a new place. It's a lot for them as well. So there's just a lot happening. There's just a lot happening in the NHS.
What about, Sharron, in terms of NHS England being abolished? Because I spoke to colleagues recently.
Yeah.
And they said obviously you need to kind of like wait and see. But in terms of from your end, the Prime Minister said NHS England has been abolished now. Are you starting to see the pressure now of NHS England being removed in terms of midwives?
Okay, I think no. At the moment, I wouldn't say so. But I think moving forward, a lot will change.
Yeah.
A lot will change. But at the moment, I wouldn't say so. But I think moving forward, there will be a lot of changes. And already, it's quite a highly pressured environment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's what's to come.
It's still very, very early, isn't it?
It's still very, very early. Yeah.
So how do you, Sharron, right now at the moment, being a midwife, how do you balance motherhood with your daughter? So if you've got like a 12-hour shift, like how do you balance it in terms of now being a mom and being a midwife? Because I know for social workers, you go and say, right, our job role is not 36 hours a week, and we have our own families as well. But how do you manage being a midwife and being a parent?
So depending on what area that I'm working in, we'll have a different schedule and a different setup. So I'm really, really honored and grateful to have my parents' support when it comes to my daughter. So what happens is in the mornings, we'll wake up, get ready, and then I'll drop her off at breakfast club. That's at 7:30. I'm also fortunate in the sense that the hospital that I work in is very near to my daughter's school and very near to my home. So I kind of planned everything. So everything's close by. So once I drop my daughter off at 7:30, I then make my way to the hospital. I'll be there within about 10 minutes. I get changed, and then I'm in handover by 7:45, 7:50, waiting for handover to start at 8 in the morning. My daughter will then remain at school for the rest of the day, and then she'll usually go to an after school club, or she'll be picked up by my parents.
Okay, that's good.
So then when I get home in the evening, by the time I get home in the evening, like her routine is like
it's sorted.
She's washed, she's in bed. So it's tough in a sense that you feel like you're missing out on a lot of your child's day.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we do like 3-4 days on, and then you have the rest of the days off. Okay. I think, but then the thing is, everyone's when anyone hears you're doing 3, let's say for the week, I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. People are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, that's great. But the rest of the days you kind of spend trying to like decompress and trying to like reset, and before you know it, you're back on the ward.
What I do want to ask you, and I think you know what I'm going to ask you next. one of the things in the NHS that I've seen is the experience of Black women during their
Yeah.
pregnancy, and there is a group that are called, I think they're called the Motherhood Group. They have been
Yes.
speaking a lot and 5 times or more in terms of the
Yes.
experiences of Black women during pregnancy. So before I talk about what you've seen as a midwife, what was your own journey in terms of your experience when you were pregnant with your daughter, and what we kind of talk about in terms of the services given to Black women, the inequalities, the stereotypes, and also the issues for Black women during pregnancy? What was your actual experience, both as someone who's gone through it and also what you've seen as a professional?
Okay, so I'll talk about two different aspects. So I'll talk about the social aspect, and then I'll talk about the physical aspect as well.
Mm.
So from a social aspect, I was pregnant at the age of 19. Like, I was having my daughter at 19. So already there's a stigma attached to teenage pregnancy, right? I'm going to these midwife appointments, I'm going to doctor's appointments, and they're just assuming that because I'm a teenager, I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just have their assumptions about me. So that there's that. And there's also, I actually hid my pregnancy. So I didn't tell my family that I was pregnant.
Go in a bit more deeper. Go on. No, Sharron, no. You can't just leave a cliffhanger. Go in a bit more. It's important.
Right.
It's
So
important.
I was growing up, I was quite, I would say I was a good child. I was a little bit loud and stuff in secondary school, but I've kept my head down most of when it mattered. I kept my head down. I got good grades and I kind of stayed focused. So I think everyone just kind of expected me to go down the traditional route of finishing school,
College,
university, and so forth. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, oh, this is not good. So I think there was an element of shame as well, because, and also feeling like I had let my parents down. So I kept it to myself, and I thought, okay, I kind of had this mindset, like, if I don't think about it and I don't acknowledge the fact that I'm pregnant, perhaps I won't be.
Yeah.
So that it was like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, no.
So I'd go to my appointments, and I would, staying relatively healthy, obviously. I did go to the club.
Sharron, you can say it's fine. It's fine. But go on. No, but it's your journey.
That because that's what you do at 19. I was going. Some of my friends had gone out of London for university, so I'd go visit them, go to the parties and stuff like that, come back to London, and sometimes I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, but I wouldn't try to think about that for too long. So I'd go to my appointments. There's a stigma attached to teenage pregnancy. I was having issues with the father of my child already, even during the pregnancy. And so that was obviously not helpful. I was also having some issues where I was trying to move out of my parents' house as well.
Okay.
Because I thought maybe if I move out, there was a way I could kind of conceal the pregnancy and the child further. I don't know where my mindset was at or how I thought it was going to work out, but that was the plan. So I'm now dealing with housing as well. And there's also something called the Family Nurse Partnership. So the Family Nurse Partnership, they work with women. They're a group of nurses. It's an organization of nurses, and they work with women who are between, I believe, if you're a teenager up until the age of about 21 and you find that you're pregnant, they kind of support you through your pregnancy up until your child is 2 years old. That was 10 years ago though, so I don't know if they're still active and still working the same way, but that was the situation that I had. So I had a teenage pregnancy midwife who happened to be a Black woman, and then I also had the Family Nurse Partnership support. So there was a stigma attached to the pregnancy, and then there was a lot of social issues that were coming up because of the issues that I was having with kind of not knowing where I was going to be staying when my daughter was born, the housing side of things, and then also the issues that I was having with my daughter's father at the time. So that was the social side of things. In terms of like the physical side, before I found out that I was pregnant, I was already overweight. And this is something that, so that there's this whole movement about black women
Yeah.
being more likely to die in childbirth and pregnancy,
yeah.
and some of these deaths unfortunately are linked to like medical, like the medical side of things, the physical aspect of things,
Yeah.
where like we're more likely, Black and Asian women
Yeah.
are more likely
For
to
the global
have
majority, yeah.
like the majority of Black and Asian women are more likely to have conditions such as diabetes, and these can obviously affect pregnancies and the outcomes. So that was something that during my pregnancy I was always like a borderline. So it was like I was having to have more tests done and go to the hospital more regularly, which was obviously interfering with my studies as well, because in my first year of uni, also I'm trying to hide this pregnancy, and now every minute I have to be at the hospital.
So there was a lot that you were kind of managing at that time.
There was a lot that I was managing and, you know, kind of dealing with. Yeah.
So with what you were saying about it, with your experiences, and obviously what you're saying about, because it's right at the moment, Black women are speaking a lot about it. What about how you were treated?
How I was treated?
Yeah.
How I was treated, I kind of put it more down to my age.
So it wasn't so much to do with race?
At the time.
Yeah.
At the time, being 19 and walking into the hospital, I just assumed I was being treated the way I was being treated because of my age.
Right.
That was my assumption at the time. But now, when I'm looking back, I think that the race was also a factor. Yeah.
And so now, 10 years later now, as being a midwife, is that something that is very much prevalent? You've seen it firsthand?
Sadly, yes. This is 10 years on, and I wouldn't say much has changed, unfortunately. I see women coming into the hospital and just feeling kind of like they're being ignored.
Yeah.
Or saying how they feel and it being overlooked. And I experienced that, and that was 10 years ago. And then now here we are, and women are still having the same experiences. Black women are still having the same experiences.
So I want to push you, Sharron, a bit more deeper.
Yeah.
Why is the experiences continuing for Black women in their pregnancy? Why is it that you're saying 10 years on, it still hasn't changed? And now you are a midwife in the profession. Why is it that the experiences of Black women going through their pregnancy, saying that this is how I'm feeling, why is it still being ignored? Obviously, we know what the issue is, but even though we know what the issue is, the racial issues, why is it now still things haven't changed?
I think that there's a range of issues, so we can't focus on one area and say that it's because of this. I think that there's a range of issues, and what it is that people have become set in their ways. So they have their stereotypes, and they kind of like, they're standing on business.
Yeah.
So that's how, like in the NHS, you've got to remember, the hospital that I work in is where I was born. There's midwives that are still working there from when I was born.
When you were born, yeah.
Those midwives, or I'm not trying to say that like the older generation aren't keeping up, but what I'm trying to say is that sometimes people have these stereotypes in their mind, and
they haven't changed,
their beliefs, and I don't think that those beliefs have changed, and sometimes they're passed on.
So you being a Black midwife, how important is it? How important is representation that you're there? When you see other Black women coming through, do they feel, and like I said, I'm just keeping it real, more comfortable that, you know, I've got a Black woman here who I know is going to give me the service because she understands me in comparison to our white counterparts?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends, because I don't think that in that way, you'd be surprised. When I was having my daughter in the hospital, the aunties that looked like me were horrible.
The older aunties.
The aunties that looked like me, that I was thinking, like, you know, when you look at someone and you kind of feel like, I'm going to be safe with this person.
Yeah.
I was having the opposite experience. Like, they were being quite mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a training issue though?
I don't know if it's a training issue or if it's, again, their stereotypes that they have. Like,
yeah.
So when I was having my daughter and I was like screaming in pain, one of the aunties was like to me, "You're an African woman." I was like, I was thinking,
So
what?
in her head, why are you screaming?
Yeah, like as if you're an African woman, you're supposed. What does that?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Obviously, in labor, I didn't stop and ask her, "Hey, what do you mean by that?" But I just thought this is bizarre. Like,
Yeah,
what does me being an African woman have to do with me
screaming that I'm in pain.
That I'm in pain, you know?
So would you say, Sharron, is kind of like that level of, okay, you've got to be a strong black woman, so even in pregnancy, this is how like we shouldn't behave?
I think that there's a stereotype that exists, but I think as like me as a midwife and a lot of my colleagues that I work with are amazing, and we just come in and everyone kind of gets a blank slate. Like I don't look at cultural things, and obviously if you come and you say I have these religious things or these cultural beliefs, I'm going to respect that, but I don't come in and think, oh, you're going to labor this way because of your ethnic background. I don't. I just, everyone just gets a clean slate, and we just kind of work with you, and you know.
So what do you think does need to change? Because I know black women are still saying it's going on. If in your mind within the NHS, what do you think needs to change in terms of black maternity?
I think that there needs to, first of all, the NHS and the people within the NHS need to listen. It's kind of like having a restaurant and people are coming to your restaurant and they're telling you, oh, we like this dish, however, it's a bit too spicy. And you just ignore it and keep on making it the same way. You know, but unfortunately, the NHS is not a restaurant where you can choose to not go. You can choose and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
With the NHS, it's kind of like a body where even if you go to another hospital, you're at risk of having the same treatment.
Of course, yeah.
Some places might be better at implementing and understanding black maternal care better. However, how do you know where you're safe?
Yeah, it's true.
And women should be safe everywhere. I shouldn't have to think, let me go to this particular hospital because they understand black maternal health.
But would you say, Sharron, it's a bit of a postcode lottery though, in a sense, because what you're saying, I think for some black women will say, actually, you know what, this hospital kind of understands my culture, so therefore I will go there because I actually think they understand. So would you say it's a bit of a postcode lottery or do you think it isn't? It's a big question though.
It's a big question, and I would say no. I wouldn't say it's a postcode lottery, because what you've got to remember is that midwives, we rotate, right? And just because I may have a positive attitude and I may consider black maternal health and, you know, want to work hard to see change, that doesn't mean that my colleagues does. And if a woman walks in on a day where she happens to find the whole team seems to be, you know, uneducated on the disparities that exist and so forth. Then so it's not a postcode thing, because you can be in any area, and you could have amazing midwives. They might not be on shift at the time you go in.
It's just that the midwife you've got there may not give you the best experience, but somebody else who comes in after a shift will give you the best experience.
Exactly.
And so when you, Sharron, have, say for example, you've seen, you know, one of your colleagues, and they may have those views, or you've seen that maybe, you know, a woman is saying, I'm not getting treated well for this. Has there ever been a point? I know you're still in on your training, but has there ever been like an event where you've had to kind of like interfere and say, well, actually, no, you know, I need to pull you up on this because I'm seeing how you're practicing with this particular parent. You're not giving them the service that as a NHS midwife you should be.
I would say that I'm not I'm very early in my I'm very early in my practice. However, I still believe that I'm assertive enough that if I see something like you've explained, I can interject. But just maybe just trying to educate my colleague. I won't really go on a very confrontational track, like I wouldn't approach it like,
Yeah.
hey, like I'll just kind of explain, like, I
Mm.
think that, we can better support this patient by
Doing it
doing
this
X, Y,
way.
and Z.
Do this way.
Yeah.
So with Sharron, you being when you finish and you've done your year, what is kind of like, what's the next step? So once you do your year, what's the next steps for you?
The next steps for me, I would like to specialize and actually work towards like these disparities and erasing them, really. So
Mm.
that's why I have my mother's room page,
I
because
was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah, so I have my mother's room page, and the whole reason why I started that page was just to kind of bring more awareness. I feel like the voice of young Black single mothers, I think we get quite a lot of negative
Yeah.
stigma
Mm.
attached to us, and I kind of just wanted to show like the positive side, that
Mm.
we're not just sitting at home having children and
Yeah.
going out and leaving our kids with our parents. Like, that might be true for someone, but I don't think it's true to like a whole group of people. So
Yeah.
I think that everyone needs to have like to show their individuality, and I'm
Yeah.
just showing like, this is my journey through motherhood. Yes,
Mm.
I'm Black. Yes, I'm raising my daughter on my own, but I don't fit the stereotype.
Yeah. And with your mother's room page, have you got, is because I've seen it and you've got a lot of positive feedback from it. So what are a lot of the mums that you set up the page up, what are they saying? They're saying, Sharron, what you've done is you're changing that kind of narrative in terms of being a single young Black mother, that actually I'm able to do this. I've got a career. I'm doing this. So what's been the general feedback?
The general feedback is quite positive. So I have a lot of, like, I've even had young women DM me about wanting to have an abortion, finding out they're pregnant, wanting to have an abortion because they feel like their life has to stop once they've had a child.
Mm.
So I can't make decisions for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
All I can do is share my journey. So I'm open with them that it's not a walk in the park, but whatever they decide to do, I can try to support them in the best way that I can, whether that's just a telephone conversation or just sharing my journey a little bit further with them through my inboxes. I've also been a victim of domestic violence in the past, so that's something that some women that I've spoken about on my page, and some women have DM'd me and wanted to know, how did I get myself out of that situation? What steps did I take? I would say that, generally it's quite positive. A lot of women, either they applaud me, they stand with me, or they're seeking advice from me. However, there is some negative feedback as well, where I've had DMs where some people have said like I'm oversharing, or some people that I know personally have told me, they have asked me not to share certain things on my platform. So yeah.
And what you mentioned about, because you spoke a lot about you touched upon the domestic abuse as well, and there is a big thing at the moment. I mean, myself and Rob did an episode against violence against women and against women and girls, and how it's on the rise. In terms of like the support you got, did you feel that you had a lot of support with your situation? I think a lot of women do say that in terms of the violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, there's not enough support for women. But in your circumstance, did you feel you had adequate support?
No, I wouldn't say I had adequate support, and I actually had quite a negative experience with social services.
Okay.
They
No, Sharron, it's important. But go on, but speak on it. It's important. I do want you to touch upon it, but go on, do speak on it. Yeah.
So I will explain the situation like as briefly as I can. So what happened was, I was involved in an altercation between me and my daughter's father, where one of my neighbors had actually called the police. So obviously when the police have arrived, they have, that has set things off in terms of safeguarding and social services becoming involved. And I feel like for a long period of time, social services were just kind of like giving me a tough time.
Was the focus mainly on you?
The focus was mainly on me. There was no focus on the other party. It was all on me about me being able to keep my daughter safe, me being able to, keep her away from harm and things like that, which is amazing and what I strive to do every single day of my life. However, sometimes it's outside of my control, and I don't feel like I had the right support to keep me and my daughter safe at that period of time.
I want to ask you a question, because one of the things, Sharron, a lot when it comes to domestic abuse, particularly working with parents, is that a lot of mothers have gone and said that a lot of the time social services, and I'm going to keep it 100, predominantly focus on the mum,
Yes.
and predominantly focus on that we say, oh, it's the mum's inability to protect the child. And one of the things we don't do is that we always put the onus on the mum, and we don't focus on the perpetrator. Like I said, a lot through the content, we get that yes, you just focus on the mum. Would you say, from your experience, that it continues to be a problem in terms of how social workers are working with parents, but working with mothers who are victims of domestic abuse? And what we're doing wrong is we're penalizing you, and actually we're not shifting to try and speak to the perpetrator about his behavior towards women.
You've said it all, literally. Like, that's the issue. The focus is on the woman, the focus is on the mum, and most mothers are trying to protect their children. And if you're in a situation where some women actually are seeking help, some women are actually, calling the right organizations, and it's like their cry for help is not being listened to because they've come to you for help, and you're literally pointing the finger back at them and saying, oh, this is your fault. And just seeing what's been going on in the media recently as well, with the recent like cases that have been in the media, highlighted in the media, if you ever read through the comments, all you see is people kind of saying,
why didn't you leave?
This is her fault. And kind of making it a joke. And I think it's time that our generation really started to take domestic violence a lot more seriously. And also the organizations like housing and social services and even the NHS just kind of taking a little bit more responsibility and stepping up a little bit more.
And just to go and shine a bit more further as well, lots of mothers who will be watching this and hearing what you're saying have often gone and said that the reason why also they may not approach social services is because they feel that social services can be very punitive towards them. And so when you've got a lot of the DMs from many mothers who've reached out, and you may have said to them, right, have you spoken to social services? Is there reluctance always because, well, no, they're going to penalize me? It's always like that, isn't it?
It's always like that. And I also think that people have this idea that all social services do is sweep in, take their children away and walk out the door. They don't actually understand a social worker's role to the full extent. They think that's what social services do is just take children away, which is not the case. I try to explain because obviously I have a lot of experience working alongside social workers. So that's not a social worker's role. So I do try to explain this, but I think that also social workers have a stigma attached to them where that's what people see them for.
So how can Sharron social workers work better with mothers who are experiencing domestic abuse, whereby we're not being too punitive? Because I know when I've worked a lot of domestic abuse cases, and I've worked with so many mothers across the years. I've worked with mothers in refuges. I've done a lot of work, but how can, because it's bigger than me and you being able to kind of deal with it. But how can we, as social workers, work better with mothers who have witnessed domestic abuse? What do we need to do better? Is it being non-judgmental? How can we work better?
I think being non-judgmental, also asking the mother, like, how best do you feel you can be supported right now? They may not know the direct answer, but they have an idea of what they would like their life to look like. And sometimes there might be things that are outside of the social worker's scope, but it's also important as a social worker knowing what organizations are out there that can support the woman with things that social services might not be able to support her with. For example, even therapy. That's something that on my journey, I've had to like seek out for myself and look for myself. But there's been so many agencies that have been involved in my life over the last 10 years that could have helped me to get into therapy sooner. So that's just one example.
Yeah. And where do you, Sharron, with your room, it's a mother's room, isn't it?
Mother's room, yeah.
Yeah. Where do you want to take it? Because I think what you said is quite positive. Where do you want to take mother's room?
Well, eventually, so I'm balancing and juggling a lot. So I'm hoping to just raise more awareness and eventually start doing events, and I'm in the process of actually building it as a charity.
Excellent.
And hopefully being able to like give back to the community. I've been fortunate enough to overcome a lot. I won't sit here and list, otherwise we'll be here forever. I've been fortunate enough to overcome a lot. There's been times where I've read stories in the paper about single mums committing suicide due to, lack of resources or being in debt and things like that. So when I see stories like that, I think, oh my gosh, like my heart goes out to them. I wish there was something I could have done. So I feel like I've been fortunate enough to overcome a lot. So now I'd like to get into a position where I can start to give back to the community.
Good. And just to say, Sharron, before we finish, because I think I'd like to say that I think you're very much an inspiration in terms of what you do.
Thank you.
And it's been really, really reflective to hear about your journey, and what you're also doing as well is that you're changing the narrative and perspective. Because I do agree with you. I think there is a lot. I would say there is a lot of stigma on being a single mum, and also young Black single women. I think there's a big stigma that's out there. But I think what you're doing is very much inspirational. You are changing the narrative. If you had a message to share to your camera to say to, for any mom, I think it's important that for any young mom who might be single, what would you say from your journey? What would your messages be to her, to any single mom who's out there watching? What would your message be to her?
So to any single mom that is watching me, I would just like to say that your journey is unique to you, and you don't have to follow any path that has been put out there, or you don't have to live up to any stereotypes, or just kind of denounce them over your life and just envision yourself as your best self. Write down steps of how you can become your best self. That's what I do every single day. I have goals and I just try to work towards being the best version of myself. So people can say whatever they want about single moms and, this baby moms and, whatever, but I don't associate with any of that. So I see myself as an individual. My journey is unique and I just keep moving forward. So
thank you, Sharron.
That's what I would say.
Thank you. And just say to everybody that I think off the back of what Sharron is saying as well, that Sharon's mother's room, Sharron is building it, and I really would encourage young women to follow Sharon's page.
Thank you.
What she's doing. And I think, Sharron, what I'll say it again, your journey has been absolutely phenomenal. Really want to, just thank you for obviously persevering, and for also representing. And I just really, really hope with what you're doing that it absolutely does not only blows, but I think the stigma does need to completely change. And and what you are showing is you're showing that there isn't a limit. There'll be challenges, but there isn't a limit to what you're doing, So
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Sharron.
And also I'd like to add that as a young Black woman that will be accessing the NHS, I think that sometimes when you look at something, you have to be the change that you want to see. So just all of us as well being responsible. So I told you that my first degree was in education, and I could have stayed working in education. But when I saw the disparities and the narrative and the stigmas and the stereotypes, I said, I have to do something about this. So I went back to university, retrained, which was tiring and was not the best decision financially, but I made it through, and now I get to support other women and make sure that there's these make sure that hopefully these disparities change and the story changes for us Black women.
Excellent. So before we wrap up, Sharron, where can everybody find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Shawawusu, and then my Mother's Room page is Mother's Room.
And before, you've got one more page actually.
Yes,
your makeup. Sorry,
yes, I have a makeup page. So I do a lot, and I feel like even in terms of posting on social media, people will message me and be like, "Where are you? We miss you.
Yourself
Why
out there,
haven't you been
Sharron?"
posting?" Guys,
It's hard, but Sharron, please start posting.
It's hard, but I'm gonna be more consistent. I'm gonna post more. And in terms of makeup, I had to kind of, something's got to give, right?
Yeah.
So I had to kind of take a step back from makeup whilst I was focusing on getting my degree and being because I'm a very present mum as well. Like, I make sure that, you know, every day we do homework, we do our Bible reading, we do a lot together. So it's not easy to juggle all of that and study. And even now as a preceptor, I still have other commitments within my work role, like training and things like that. So it's a lot happening, but I'm going to get back into makeup. I'm going to get back into posting regularly.
Room, we need to see you there.
Yes.
We need to see
you. And hopefully I'll do an event soon so I can like meet the people that I've been interacting with, because I've had the page for about 6 years now.
You need to
Sharron,
you got to step up, man. You have to step up. You got to step up. You have to step up. No, but Sharron, no, honestly, just thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on. So people, you know where to find Sharron. Please go and follow her page. And you know where to find myself and Rob. You like, subscribe and share, and we'll see you soon.